Welcome to How to Rock Spirit's Cosmic Consciousness audio series, a collection of spiritual, scientific, and psychedelic musings by Pluto's Corona, a Leo rising Scorpio with Sagittarius moon, born in the year of the Metal Ram. Pretty much all of these audio entertainments have been a collaborative effort between myself and my friend and producer Al Ginsberg. It is our belief that the truth and everything that can be known is already out there, and we're not here to explain it, we're here to explore it together. For more far-out discussions about spirit, alchemy, psychedelics, yoga, and cosmic intelligence, visit my YouTube channel, How to Rock Spirit, where you'll find a slowly growing database of all of Ram and Dog's psychedelic blogs and audio recordings. Take your time and enjoy the ride, folks, and we'll meet you on the other side. Namaste. Cool, we're recording. Sweet.
A little bit to trim off, that's all.
Yeah, it's all good. Okay, so I guess I'll stretch my vocalizer. So, how's it going, folks? Thank you so much to my friends. I got two Pisces on tow with me right now. It's kind of cool. We got two Pisces and a Scorpio. It's sure to be some cosmic ass shit. We got a Pisces dog and a Pisces boar and Scorpio metal ram. And this one's called Psychedelic Transmissions. I guess I'll just roll with my script as usual here. So, I like to go out to the beach and do acid or mushrooms, and I always like to throw some Hawaiian baby wood rose in there too. Lately, I've been thinking that Hawaiian baby wood rose is kind of like it's an alchemical additive that opens a gate to increasing or magnifying the neurological impression made by the primary psychedelic agent that you're doing, like LSD or mushrooms or what have you. Helps to really burn it into your neurons, I like to think. So anyway, I like to go to the beach and do psychedelics. And when people tell me this, they always give me a funny look, as if to ask, what the hell is it that you do out there? Well, I usually answer by saying that it's different for each person, you know. Some people like to do acid just with friends and stuff, or, mushrooms to have a laugh. And that's important too, the hedonistic side. What I do when I'm out by myself on some kind of psychedelic, I'll do a psychedelic yoga on top of whatever philosophizing, listening to music. I take artistic notes or whatever else I do when I'm out walking around on drugs by myself. It can be kind of frightening and weird because I tend to stick out like a sore thumb anyway. I'm always wearing my paisley patterned pants and my long hair, and I look like a weirdo. But thankfully I haven't been hassled while I was out on one of these trips. Though I can't really do any heroic doses out there like I would like to, obviously. You don't want to be out there on 6 grams and just like blinking out and someone comes along and is like, holy shit, what is this animal thing going on right now, right? I'd like to do a deep Terrence McKenna purging deep trip like that. I just gotta find the circumstances to do it. But in any case, before I go on to the big thing here, I've got a little paragraph here that talks about Timothy Leary's idea of the neuronaut. I generally define the type of psychedelic yoga that I do when I'm out by myself on the beach, listening to the waves or whatever. I call it a sort of neuronautical exploring. That word's a composite word coming from the prefix neuro, which Tim Leary he loved to use so much, that relates to the nervous system and the senses, and nautical, as in like the word astronaut, which means an astronaut is an explorer of outer space. Astro, right? Astro and nautical. Nautical means like going into a suit to explore the ocean's floor or any kind of space, So neuronautical is the idea of being in a suit which can explore realms of feeling through the feedback received from the outer world through one's sensory organs. Thankfully, we humans have been designed with just such a suit. Neuronautical exploring, in the sense that Tim used it, can be seen, it's an exercise of getting a feel for the firmament, learning the difference between what we imagine this world to be through our mental projections and what the world actually is as transcribed by the data through our senses and the senses of our fellow explorers. Because we all kind of perceive, we all receive that objective data through different subjective apertures. A neuronaut is one who explores inner space and uses various psychedelic instruments of the mind to make definitions, discoveries, and speculations about the nature of their own consciousness, which they are exploring. It's kind of like an eyeball looking at itself in a mirror and trying to discover how it works. It also involves how I do it. My psychedelic yoga involves moving the body around in order to feel out which postures create a strong flow of energy. And that makes a physiological diagnostic tool out of the whole experience. Tim Leary might have called this exploration on the fifth evolutionary neurocircuit in his psychedelic metaphysics. It's the level of awareness which constitutes neurosomatic consciousness, and the working out of tensions that collect over time in one's muscular armoring. Anyway, we'll get more into Timothy Leary next year, in the Year of the Fire Rooster. I kind of plan to make this Year of the Monkey series a sort of precursor to that. Yeah, next year I'm going to do the whole thing's going to be all about Timothy Leary's Game of Life. Because that book is like, he calls it a starseed signal, or the people that wrote the book after him, they call it like a starseed signal. It's just so much compacted in there that can be unfolded. And that's what I'm going to try to do next year. But for now... So anyway, all this stuff is what I basically refer to as my psychedelic yoga practice. It's the practice of connecting to feeling through the nervous membranes and getting a clearer picture of things by discerning between reality and the fog of the mind. This synaptic realization of what is constitutes, in my opinion, the basic reality underlying Zen and what the Buddhists call Satori, that flash of illumination. The realization that all forms are an illusion in one's reality tunnel of perception, as we all translate the data of the universe differently through each of our subjective apertures for the light. And our specific lenses for understanding the objects in reality all translate our experiences and realities differently. We all have different reality tunnels for it. Anyway, so what I want to talk about today relates more with the planetary orientation for one's energy. Tim's neuroenergy thing, his whole bit is a bit more of a metal monkey thing. And as I said, we'll get more into that later. But I'm a metal ram. I like to focus on dimensions of consciousness in my writing that are different than Tim's anyway. Today's discussion is about mapping out the true will of the person who's transcribing all of these neurological sensations that are being received. I intend to use this schema of a philosophical mysticism of occultists, which is widely expressed in the writings of guys like Aleister Crowley, the Thelemites or Thelema, the Gnostics, and initiates of the Golden Dawn. That's the kind of stuff I've been getting into lately. It relates to this idea of what you might call initiating a conversation with the mystical other, or the holy other, as Terence McKenna referred to it, and trying to really get in touch with whatever that is, as we'll be exploring today. So I've done many trips where I felt the uncanny presence of something strange and unplaceable, something strangely other infiltrating the workings of my daily living, almost like an eerie spirit or it's like a hidden intelligence principle that's guiding the rails of my reality and my unconscious promptings. Rumi referred to this mysterious phenomenon as the friend. What exactly do I mean by this? Well, first of all, when I'm out there on mushrooms, I like to observe the natural phenomena of my mind as being automatic. Look at it go. As if I were an observer watching my body and my breath and everything from the outside or the inside or whatever. And this seems to have some mystery to it. Look at it go, like I said. Usually I identify with that intelligent self-organization. I look at the waves of Lake Ontario, where I've done many of my nature trips, listening to the lustrous, trickling white noises of the waves, and I feel connected to it. Like it is as much me as it is its own separate physical phenomenon and motion. Images spring to my mind on these trips of previous times I've swam in lakes, and also of like scenes in movies and songs which have lake water in it. And on psychedelics at such times, I receive subtle impressions of synthetic waveforms and archetypes by watching the water, which seem to reflect archaic hieroglyphs, kind of like looking at the basic movement of energy between strange dimensional pillars. I guess it's kind of like I'm looking at the unfoldment of DNA itself when I'm out there on acid and I see the waves, right? I'm often reminded of what appears to be past life memories in these times, like of being a fish or some kind of amoeboid bacteria. It feels like I'm watching visions from a time when our planet was still being terraformed or something, and almost as if like I'm connected to that ancestral image of being some glob running away from the other globs, trying to eat the edible globs. Anyway, so these impressions concocted in my mind are only faint memories activated by the window of my present experience, meaning, my sensations of the waves, the sounds, the feeling of the wind and the sand in my toes. It connects me back. The point I'm getting at is that when I feel the presence of the mysterious other, as Terence McKenna called it, it's not my observation of the phenomenal wanderings of my mind and my body which give me that uncanny sensation. The mind is an interstellar neurological memory bank, which is constantly transgressing and fusing with memes and gestalt impressions of similar experiences contained in one's past through DNA. The DNA chain of remembrance contains every little lick of data we've ever absorbed. But if we remembered all of the little details of our past memories all at once and all the time, we couldn't possibly pay attention to the present moment. That's just the nature of the photon beam of our conscious attention. It's a ray, not a floodlight. It can be a floodlight. That's how mystics, poets, and visionaries receive their synaptic transmissions of transcendental vision, by seeing everything congealed in a flash of illumination. But in that sort of floodlight, that mystical floodlight sort of trance, when one's traveling the astral light within, it's hard to, one can hardly pay attention to the immediate sensory data blasting on their neurons from their environment without interrupting the transmission. It's hard to be looking within and to also be fully aware of what's going on outside at the same time. Some people can do it, I guess, In any case, when I'm out on an LSD trip and I'm observing the ebbing and flowing mental activity of my brain's own organic computing hardware, I don't identify the sensory undercurrents that are occurring there as being the mystical other. The fact that material reality moves automatically is not the mystery that I'm getting at, although it is mysterious. Those animal motions are evidently explainable by science and biology. It's all numbers. They're simply life continuing. They're data, the dark velvet grove of physical sensorium working behind one's eyelids in a world of connected physical causality. Biology is all just mathematics as much as any physical science is. The mystical other comes when I start to question the meaning of the mathematics of my body. When I'm on psychedelics, what gives me a sense of the workings of the mysterious other, by which I mean the peculiar sensation of an unseen god or gods somehow putting a finger into my experience and touching me with it from some other end, it's not the images of DNA, memory, flashes, or all this biological stuff, what the Hindus call Maya, playing out its magical theater. That's like what constitutes the fabric of this dreamy reality that we live in. Rather, it is the synchronicity of the subjective meaning of my experiences. The strange sensation of there being a coherent pattern or purposeful design in the deceivingly arbitrary flowing from one gestalt impression to the next. Of there being a design to it all. The mysterious other is not the data of life itself. It is the coherence of the data, the impressions of there being karmic meaning hidden in it all, which nobody outside of my inner experience could possibly quantize or help me to quantify, except perhaps through the feedback of a well-informed psychological counselor or guru. Such a figure, of course, could only ever be a soundboard to my internal experience. I believe this personal continuum of meaningfulness in the seemingly disjointed, meaningless picture frames of life experience is itself the hyperdimensional object whose understanding and cognition on our part is the true key of gnosis and holism, which Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, referred to as the integration of the unconscious personality. And so far as I see it, is the root of self and heart, which we all secretly seek to unwind and liberate within ourselves. I consider it to be the underlying libidinal motif and ineluctable theme of events in one's life, which psychedelically develop what we know of as the psyche. Modern psychiatry rightly tells us that the psyche usually congeals through the developmental impressions we absorb from our parents and teaching figures throughout childhood. Of course, modern psychiatry also rightly insists that our neurological impressions in childhood inform who we are, who we come to be. That's the empirical nurture side of the old nature versus nurture debate. It's all psychological math equations at that level. If one's parents are hard-boiled institutional types, that will reflect in the personality of the child. Just as if one's parents are more artistic, soft-hearted types, so will that also reflect in the child. But the mystic notion of karma sees this developmental process as merely being the psychological scalpel of God or fate. It's the gauntlet which existence puts us through individually in order to become who we inherently are within. The persona which our total entity incidentally attracts through destiny. Most people are, of course, inclined to observe that everything in their lives happens to them, that everything happens to little old me. Little do they realize, however, that what actually happened back there in the past was that me happened to me. So far as karma is concerned, we attract the events and circumstances which the soul, written in each of our DNA codes, unconsciously perpetuates. Fate is like a flower which spreads its pollen by attracting a certain type of bee or other insects and animals. Those other animals and insects are as much a part of the flower as are the petals of the flower itself. And conversely, the experiences we attract to ourselves are just as much a part of our total entity as are our skin, our teeth, our hair, and our nails. Now, picture meditating on a beach on mushrooms and observing what happens. Psychedelics tend to magnify the tapestries of experience, while also giving the mind a fluid, flowing quality, so that one may be inclined to simply observe the mechanism of the active conscience and to observe where and how it seeks its own level, its own synaptic equilibrium all by itself. It just goes, whatever we're interested in. Oh, look at it go. This is what I'm interested in, I guess. It's like a flower, I guess. It just kind of goes with no mind. There's always loads of data in the ebbing and flowing of mind, of course, because we're always absorbing information, and our genetic equipment is always dealing with it in its own way at every stage of the picture frame of our existence. What's interesting is that the natural aesthetic tendency of the soul is to dive only into certain thoughts. Each individual is attracted to certain sensations, certain memes, memories, and, distractions. Different people tend towards different perceptions, different experiences, and different reality tunnels, even though we're all observing the same basic data out here in material reality. These individual tendencies are a product, as I see it, of the mammal genetic programming, which is a natural part of our memory and our lives. So, for the sake of example, let's say that my impression of the waves that I'm experiencing makes me think of romantic interests I may have had on the beach. I've been on the beach before, and I was with a girl, and we were listening to the waves. And now me here on mushrooms am listening to the waves, and I get caught in that old memory. Or maybe maybe the waves make me think of a beach in a beer commercial or something, and it gets my salivary glands going, and it makes me crave a beer. Now, I happen to advocate psychedelics like mushrooms or LSD for any sort of trip, ranging from the hedonic or the mundane to the spiritually disciplined alike. Acid is groovy when you're just hanging out on it, and it's also incredibly powerful as a tool for self-development practices. It teaches you a lot just by getting stoned and watching a movie on Netflix or television or whatever, because it activates these synaptic neural connections in a way that can incite that same strange convergence of synchronicity and soul purpose, which I talk about having out here on my beach trips. Those uncanny parallels and synchronicities which seem so mysterious and alien feeling to one's rational mind. In my case, usually when myself and my best spiritual ally, Al Ginsberg, as well as a select crew of other members in our psychedelic brigade, decide to go out to Lake Ontario for an acid trip, one thing that we really like to do is meditate in the forest by the water. It's different from the hedonistic trip, that's what most people think of when they talk about doing acid. Let's just go out and do acid and have some fun. And it is fun too, but there's a clear and logical reason why I think meditating on acid is such a powerful tool for self-discovery and for catalyzing the experience of this cosmic other phenomenon, which I'm talking about. I can only speak for myself, mind you, being, I'm Leo rising Scorpio, born in the year of the metal goat. When I try to meditate, I try to observe when my unconscious genetic programming seems to be interrupting or guiding my present awareness and my Buddha, my eternal awake emptiness within. and I like to watch how I unconsciously clasp at desirous images and mental distractions, such as a fond memory of a lover or a stupid beer commercial or what have you. I like to observe these things. I recognize which of these programs are unconscious, and I don't necessarily try to snuff them out right away, which is what most people think that you try to do when you meditate. There are many types of meditation, and that sort of meditation is more like a concentration practice, where you discipline your conscious awareness to be diligently still and unebbing, like a blank slate or a blank screen. That sort of meditation I like to think of as like a linear directive of the mind. You're really trying to blank out so there's just nothing but that that hum, you know? I instead, usually when I'm out on acid, I do that kind of meditation, but this is more along the lines of what I'm getting at, is that I sort of let these rambling, hardwired brain programs of like, craving a beer or craving an old lover or whatever, I kind of like to let them play themselves out a little bit. I make some distance between them and myself, the Shiva of my limitless inner eye. And I slowly draw back from that unconscious programming until my neuro-aware sort of comes into tune with my conscious intention to be completely still. In other concentration practice styles of meditation, where you just try to blank out like I was saying, my conscious attention batters constantly against the tenaciously springing thoughts of what the Hindus call the monkey mind. And this can be very mentally exhausting. Here instead, we are trying to slowly withdraw from the brain programs, not by fighting them, but by breathing with them, sort of letting your unconscious, whatever programming you have, just go. Feeling the tension and excitement which they invoke in our nerves, and gradually, slowly dissipating them as they slowly return to a center of power in ourselves, and eventually, hopefully, the monkey mind begins to drop like flies, all on its own. I like to think a good analogy for this sort of meditation that I'm talking about. It can be found in Sun Tzu's Art of War. In the Art of War, Sun Tzu remarks that you should never back your enemy's army into a corner, because then they become suffocated and desperate, and they fight with the ferocity and tenacity of a caged tiger. You may beat them, but you waste a lot more of your own resources and the morale of your soldiers by doing so than you might have done by simply coaxing them into a pliant, conservatively negotiated surrender and submission. You kind of give them the space to surrender. So in the same way, I recognize these tenacious, sensational monkey mind programs and behaviors in myself, and I let some of it play itself out a little bit. There are lessons contained in it, These programs are a direct message from the mystic other, from what Western occultists call the holy guardian angel within. I kind of consider it to be a hyperdimensional entity which is using your own DNA memory as a medium or tool to get in touch and in tune with you, like a radio receiver or a TV dial. Here's a cool image. These unconscious brain programs of ours that we experience in our everyday lives, like me being out trying to meditate and all of a sudden I get a sensation of a beer or whatever. They're kind of like the white noise on an old cable television, which it would buzz loudly in order to let you know that you haven't yet found the station you're looking for, Oh, that's not it. That's not it. Click. Here we go. HBO, right? Intergalactic HBO, the Gaia network. Anyway, when I'm out there on acid and I meditate, what I try to do is to slowly, receptively And in a yin yielding, erotic sort of way, I learned the subtleties of how to still the ebbing and flowing of my tenacious monkey mind's easily distracted attention. And after a while, I start to recognize subtle patterns, subtle themes, and motifs where the deep Plutonian undercurrents which guide my thought seem to have developed a groove, like a valley or a riverbed of unconscious soul. Like, whoa, I didn't realize that was there. Like I always say, the serpent's head of present awareness always aims according to where its body has been. There, where the raw, updwelling soul unconsciously springs, is the golden key to unlocking the nature of what Gnostics and Thelemic magicians call the true will. As in Aleister Crowley's, his aphorism of the new Aeon, do what thou wilt. In a way, this so-called true will represents the same function of the psyche which we astrologers refer to as Pluto or Minerva. I always like to say, in my natal astrology, I'm a Leo rising with the Sun, Mars, and Pluto all conjunct or tied together in the same degree in the sign of Scorpio. So in a way, I feel like the Sun is illuminating through my work the nature of Minerva, or Pluto, the torrents of the unconscious true will, or at least that's what I feel is a big part of my whole shtick. That's why I call my whole thing is Pluto's corona. It's like a corona is like the sun's rays. So Pluto's corona is kind of like Pluto, the unconscious torrents of the soul, being illuminated. Anyway, enough about me, said the Leo, right? Yeah. Do you want us to wait for you, Dill? I guess we'll just keep going. Yeah, sure. The phrase "do what thou wilt" is not, as some people might think, a licentious offering to go willy-nilly and perform ludicrous acts brought on by the monkey mind, which don't concede at all to universal truth or to one's personal truth. Do what thou wilt is a call to recognize the mystic other in yourself, the secretly conveyed convergence of designedness which has been tagging along with you all your life since the moment you burst out of the womb, or into the womb, the cosmic womb, right? It is the integration and understanding of the strands of unconscious personality which lead us to do what we do and to create what we create and to want to create what we create. And it is from there that we can derive our true purpose. This is like the will. This interloping Gaian intelligence principle from within, I like to think of it as a transmission from DNA to rid yourself of the distractions of your life, to synthesize all the synchronous messages of the reality that you perceive into a concise, pragmatic whole, conducive to a personal existence, which is ergonomically fitted to the soul. It's ergonomically fitted to a tantric continuum, the extension of light out of the dark black matter of baser instincts. As I said, I like to call it a reflection of an ergonomic design in the soul. That's what the true will is trying to express. Do you ever get deja vu? That odd feeling like you've been in this same circumstance before, which occasionally creeps up your spine as if this had happened once in a dream, with almost similar characters, just juxtaposed this time around with slightly new faces? Ever heard of the soulmate phenomenon, or the idea that we attract certain people over and over again in our incarnations because they represent a crucial aspect of that mysterious psychological scalpel of God mentioned before, as perhaps they represent a scattered piece of our own soul. It doesn't make much quote unquote rational sense, does it? These strange, unsettling, subjective feelings that we sometimes get, through, like, deja vu is a good one, that feeling of synchronicity. And also we get it on mushrooms and stuff. These are an example of what New Agers call the synchronicity phenomenon. And synchronicity is, of course, something which could not possibly be objectified or relegated to a scientific evidence of any sort, because it is of such an unavoidably personal nature. It's true that sometimes a spade is just a spade, and that coincidences do exist, but they're certainly a lot less common than one might be inclined to suppose. Now, I'm not one of these guys like Robert Anton Wilson who thinks that the number 23 is constantly stalking them. Or at least if it is, I don't care to seek it out, probably because my Sagittarius moon. Something happens to me, I see it as just bound to happen, whether or not the details of the events reflect some sort of Kabbalistic significance to it. But I do, without a doubt, believe the Kabbalistic mystical notion that every stitch and fabric of our personal reality is an affair between God and the soul. There's no point in hair splitting here because the phenomenon can be argued for both ways, but when I'm out there on psychedelics praying and I feel that creepy presence of the divine light sort of descending on me from my crown, some sort of alien intelligence kind of scratching the back of my head, and I begin to feel like everything that had led me up to that particular peak was designed to literally bring me there in that moment, to have whatever revelations I'm having. In my own subjective experience, I feel like everything is being guided for a constructive, purposeful reason, for a lesson or something. We attract what we become. This is why I like to refer to our unconscious brain programming behavior, or those monkey mind instincts of ours. They're not arbitrary or meaningless, at least for the most part. But instead, I refer to it all as being one big psychedelic transmission from Mama Gaia, or Seed Father, the alien other within. It takes diligence and an objective scientific discernment of the most refined variety to be able to weed through these transmissions and properly allocate which parts of the raw data in life are one's own primitive monkey mind gunk, and which are truly the pains of psychedelic sunshine beaming through the jungle canopies of terrestrial memory and social construct. Of course, it's always possible that any empirical transliteration of these psychedelic DNA transmissions and their mysterious source, they may lack the linear logic upon which a proper theory can be executed and experimented with to prove the theory. This is simply the nature of the beast, the psychedelic gambit of the mystic visionary. Sometimes a bit of faithful surrender to the whims of the inner code is necessary to really dig one's claws into a proper examination of what these transmissions. For, in the words of the 17th century mystic Abremelin the Mage, it serveth not to speak without devotion. Thus shalt thou inflame thyself totally in thy prayer. So here's what I mean. A key piece of advice Robert Anton Wilson gives in Cosmic Trigger and in other places regarding the scientific method of mysticism is to be wholly enveloped in the experiment while it is occurring, to be enwrapped in the experiment with mind, body, and soul, and then to save one's skepticism for after the experiment's over. Because if you become skeptical amidst the proceedings of these experiments, you'll obstruct the raw flow of data in the mind's natural course. This is what we have to do as scientists exploring the frontiers of the unknown in any field of study, let alone in the study of the self. Now, when I say to stick with the experiment, I don't mean just within the short window frame of psychedelic rapture at the peak of a high. I mean to take the experiment and its shocking revelations and open yourself to the internal impressions you receive for at least a day or two, or even a week. Open yourself to looking for clues to the synchronistic coherence hidden in the velvet backdrop of all your life's experiences. Take a trip through memory lane and see if there are any sublime hieroglyphic symbols or subtle meanings conveyed in the tapestry of your whole life experience. How did your schooling affect you and who you thought you could be? How did the worldview of your parents alter your course? They aren't perfect either, you know, and they were once children looking up to their parents and society for answers just like you. And where do you think they got it from? And where do you think they got it from? Ask yourself, how did your society and its laws mold you? How did your own unconscious choices affect the person you ended up developing into? Write these observations down, especially during and after your psychedelic trip, and then stew on them. Be open to any new revelations and the idea that there might be a mysterious design and secret pattern hidden in it all. There might be more to the arbitrary events in your life than you have been thinking. So try this for about a week or so. That's the experiment. If you've not been satisfied and you think this is still all drivel, then you can feel free to toss the whole ordeal out the window and get back to your TV, beer commercials, and your insatiable desires and the rest of your mundane monkey mind life. It seems easier when life does not appear to have any deeper meaning or psychedelic purpose, doesn't it? When you can just sort of course along the walls and lollygag and not concern yourself with the bigger picture of the true meaning of your life. At least for now it does, while you're young. Maybe I'll ask you again when you're 50 years old and running out of time, and then we'll see if your answer has changed at all. As I said, it can be a daunting task trying to figure out whether you are truly in contact with an alien entity outside of yourself, or perhaps with a future state of your own divinity telecommunicating instructions to heal you from some transcendental place beyond time, or else whether all you've been doing is listening to the empty chatterings of a monkey meaninglessly slamming its palm into the keyboard of a typewriter. Aleister Crowley had a funny way of sitting on the fence with this issue. A lot of his so-called truths, they came down to the essence of the person questioning it. To an esteemed psychologist who asked Crowley about the nature of what Crowley called the holy guardian angel within, Crowley remarked, "Oh, well, it is of course the dark recesses of one's own unconscious feeding back echoes against the walls of the firmament of the psyche." That answer is sort of taking it from the vantage point of the Western intellectual. To a religious advocate, on the other hand, who asked about the angel, Crowley's response was that the angel within was, of course, God, speaking through a divine emissary within the soul. To other friends and acquaintances, Crowley espoused the nature of the angel as being a supreme extraterrestrial intelligence, possibly trying to transcribe futique messages of higher planes of beauty and glory through the psychedelic linguistic medium of one's own mind, and even through the arbitrary events which unfold our natural psychological development, through the gauntlet of fate, as I said. The source of these transmissions could possibly be occurring from a control station in Sirius 9 or the Pleiades or some other intergalactic agency beyond our own star system. That could be us over there playing a game of Sims, you know, using these avatars. Earth, the hottest new MMORPG in the Milky Way Galaxy Central. That's what's so trippy about us Earthlings as avatars. We Earthlings do not represent a controlled sequence of non-player characters, you know? Every sentient consciousness plays a part in creating our world, from the minerals to the plants to man. and woman. And we all have to get in tune with each other and form parties and guilds if we want to get at the higher stakes dungeons in the game. See, I'm trying to express the will of my own alien intelligence beaming from Sirius 9 or whatever that speaks from within myself, my own personal intuition. And if I do so, I have to pay less attention to you. And you are also listening to the whisperings of God within your own soul. And how do we connect our wills within to harmonize them? Is life all just a satanic territorial grab bag, a race for who can grab the precious treasures of the world first? Or is there an advantage to sublimating into a transpersonal group consciousness? Should we instead work together to harmonize the will of our individual gods and daemons from within in order to make our wills conducive to the expression of spirit as a greater transpersonal whole, a planetary whole? I'm, of course, inclined to think of the latter as the real truth. It's just kind of hard when you're trying to mesh with everybody else and you're also trying to toe the line of your own inner will without being limited by social circumstance, I guess. Here's another interesting question. Are we all avatars being directed by the same player? The same computer geek up there on Sirius 9? The same one Shiva eye controlling us all us little Sims down here? Are we all connected to the same inner God? Are all our individual directives as humans with separate egos all aimed toward the same planetary agenda? Or is there a politique going on in the celestial spheres behind the surface of our material world that involves different interstellar personas staking claims in the terrestrial sphere down here? It's kind of like we're kind of like an animal whose fleas are at war with each other as a planet. I mean, when you look at the fast food and entertainment billboards that dot our cities and highways, or any kind of sign you see in reality, do you think that they are really just a mercantile ploy by wealthy capitalist industrialists? Or is it possible that every single sign that reaches our eyes in material reality is a message from an extraterrestrial agency trying to win us over to their own interstellar agenda? What's really going on here? How much of my experience is really directed by my own whims and fancy? When I think about all this, I like to note what Isreal Regardie remarked on the subject, which is that it is more convenient to assume that there is an existence of an angel or angels controlling us than it is to allege that our invocation and reception to inner messages is awakening a supernormal power hidden within ourselves. Meaning it's all me. That's kind of his idea. But in any case, whether the thing is it or it's me, the truth of the matter is ultimately less significant than what you do with it when you start to get in conversation with it, and whether you recognize its import and start allowing it into your life. One thing that is definitely for certain in all this is that the degree to which one opens their heart chakra, their intention, to the voice within and transforms themselves with it and goes public with their transformed state of consciousness, that is the degree to which one will start being called a loony and a crackpot by everyone else in society who's afraid to look at the light beaming through the jungle canopy of the past. You think your parents or the police or the politicians want to hear that their DNA and the synchronistic unfoldment of their lives hides a secret encoded message to the subjective meaning of their personal existence? That's bad for business, you know? And they especially don't like hearing that you might be listening to the beat of your own inner drummer and making their neurotic, socially fabricated rhythm seem out of time. This is basically, in my opinion, the reason why Aleister Crowley was such a sore thumb to the English Victorian era consciousness out of which he came. Same thing with Timothy Leary, Giordano Bruno, and all the greatest geniuses of history who cracked the tenuous code in the fault line of sanity and painted the walls with the message they found there. Crowley's detractors and followers alike called this condition Crowleyanity, like insanity. Crowley himself called this phenomenon the insolubility of rational reason in the face of divine inner compulsions and revelations, the crossing of the abyss, which shakes one's intellectual stability through a meditative dissolution of the girders of the soul. That's how Isreal Regardie kind of put it. I'm going to include here a large passage from Isreal Regardie's classic and quite illuminating text on Crowley. This book is called The Eye in the Triangle, an interpretation of Aleister Crowley. I'm hoping this will add a little academic meat to this discussion, because that book is the most illuminating text that I've found regarding these particular subjects which we're presently talking about, alongside Robert A. Wilson's Cosmic Trigger. That's another huge one. Robert A. Wilson was actually told to read this book, The Eye in the Triangle, by Alan Watts. I actually heard that. Alan Watts is my favorite lecturer, and he's an eternal Zen influence on me. And so, yeah, Alan Watts was an occultist and a psychological alchemist after all. I thought that was pretty cool to learn, because he's very objective and empirical, and he puts everything in a very Zen, objective way. But if you read The Eye in the Triangle, it says a lot about his, I guess he also perceived the subjective things that we're talking about. So, this comes from The Eye in the Triangle, page 313. This may seem a little opaque at first, but Isreal Regardie, he eventually brings it around to a logical dissertation at the end, or at least I hope so. So, and I quote, "In the Golden Dawn system of magic, the 5 initiatory ceremonies after the neophyte or 0 equals 0 ritual were devoted to invoking the elements. The intent was that they, both the ritual and the elementals invoked, would stir up and awaken within the candidate the corresponding depths of his structure. They were the fundamental basis of his total organismic operation." Crowley adapted this system to a magical self-development incantation called the Invocation of the Goetia. The first statement of this little ritual of Crowley's was, "Thee I invoke, the bornless one." It would be followed by several sections dedicated to invoking the 4 cardinal quarters of the elements of earth, air, water, and fire, the psychological elements, culminating in the invocation of Akasha, or ether, which is considered the quintessential 5th element, sometimes called spirit. Finally, there is the ecstatic section, culminating in the attainment or identification with the higher self. It's called the Agoeides. It's the holy angel within. This process requires some strenuous magical work in the sense of the need to concentrate and the requirement of the trained magical ability to let the ritual exalt the consciousness until it overleaps all barriers to induce samadhi. To let himself go, wrote John Simmons in his rather diminutive biography on Crowley. He said of Crowley, "To let himself go, to hurl himself over the brink of consciousness, was an urge by which Crowley was constantly possessed. It arose out of a state of tension which he normally relieved by sexual intercourse." This is a key to Crowley's personality and his philosophy. So this is all still from The Eye in the Triangle. And Isreal Regardie continues on the next page. This release is the key to much modern thinking too. For example, Wilhelm Reach's concept of the orgasm reflex is similar in some ways to Crowley's. Orgasm is a natural organismic discharge of tension in a series of body clonisms that arise during coitus, during sex. which eclipse consciousness. It is a natural means of discharging tension. And this is the context of Reach's classic controversial text, The Function of the Orgasm. I always think of it as like, the dark side of the moon, right? Now, it was on the 15th of November, 1905. Yeah, Crowley, 1905, this is a long time ago. Still relevant, though, I think. It was on the 15th of November, 1905, that Crowley and a little group sailed for Bamo up the Irrawaddy, as he was an infamously avid mountain climber and hiker, Crowley. It's all good, buddy. It's all good, man. At the time, Crowley was still very involved in this process of working through his spiritual conflicts on the intellectual level, having invoked and revealed to himself so much of the unconscious forces that direct his mind on an everyday basis. He was having difficulty intellectualizing and cognizing it all. The misery attending these insoluble realizations was agonizing. His insanity persisted through these travels, only beginning to break around the middle of February of next year, 1906. The Equinox, Crowley's famous annual publication, which amassed about 20 years of or so of work, the Equinox shares an account of Crowley's experience, which is quite illuminating of this episode. It asks the question, how did Crowley come to resolve the philosophical problems with which he was dealing, settling as he did, if he did, on being crouched over the abyss of social insanity while facing inner spiritual convulsions that contradicted the rules and law of his tribe, of his environment and society and culture? How did he deal with learning to be truly spontaneous and free within the regulations of a social fabric or a social fabrication? And the answer came not from meditations on the intellectual level at all. He learned that the problem of reason is not soluble on its own plane unless transcended in some manner. Unless reason is used to destroy itself in this conflict, no other solution is probable or possible. I should note that Crowley was very much into the Oriental way of thinking by the time he had these experiences, so he very well understood the nature of what we might call the Taoist way, which is a very natural sort of way. Lao Tzu was the archetypal Taoist sage, and he always went up against Confucius. And Confucius was the guy that said, we all have to have social regulations in order to keep each other from being too wild. And Lao Tzu said those social regulations would only dim the spiritual impulse from within. And those two are a great dialectical expression of these ideals that we're talking about here. Anyway, back to the quote. This is still coming from the Eye in the Triangle. The cortex, regardie tells us, or the intellect, was evolved for the express purpose of dealing realistically and immediately with problems relating to survival. It is a good instrument for commerce, for business, for the language of daily activity. There's not a better one. But the nature of the cortex, the intellect, does not fit it to be a tool for coping with higher philosophical or spiritual matters. So it must be transcended. The difficulty is that our culture, A, has not taught us to use other tools, and B, has forced identification with it, the intellectual cortex. To transcend it, one must leave it for use in practical, mundane matters only. Yet it must seem like suicide or insanity to attempt to drop intellectuality without having forged another set of tools. That's when Crowley started pining for this samasati meditation, which I'll explain in a moment. But before I do, I'll say this. This is all still coming from the eye in the triangle. The dialectical perspective of two different thinkers can easily contradict themselves, and both views are typically reconcilable only by reference to a higher and transcendental unitary process. If a person reaches the stage of growth where they are capable of manipulating one attitude against the other, they will inevitably produce the kind of mental tension that results in the temporary insanity we are considering in the case of Crowley. Crowley sought he sought that unresolved state of tension, which would cause this insanity, which Regardie's talking about here. For that tension of not knowing is better than the stagnance of a false perception, which is a very Taoist notion. Sort of like the Zen idea of vidya as opposed to avidya. Avidya is illusion, but vidya means being open to the way reality is or could be, and not allowing oneself to settle in any direction of fixed knowledge or self-assuredness just for the comfortable convenience of feeling like one knows something. So that's the end of the that's the end of the quotation from the eye in the triangle. While this book is a tough and rather lengthy mystical read, it was, as I said, a text which profoundly affected the consciousness of both Alan Watts and Robert Anton Wilson, two literary figures which are very important to me. And it also had a huge effect on me. Totally changed the way I orient myself in reality. It's the most profound work of psychology and spirituality that I've read since Autobiography of a Yogi. So, as I said, getting into the game of trying to find direct communications from subtle entities, the mystic other, or from the subtle feedback from the walls of one's own DNA code or whatever. This is a sticky wicket, to say the least. Really, it all comes down to a question of how confident and comfortable you are with being considered insane by the general masses. How comfortable you are with listening impersonally and detachedly to the pining of your subjective inner heart's impulses, and looking for potential clues in your reality tunnel, which might be disguised psychedelic transmissions coming from Mother Gaia consciousness at Grand Central Station, hidden within the material husk of Maya. By the way, when I say psychedelic transmissions, I guess I should say I think of the word psychedelic in its classic definition by Humphrey Osmond in the 60s. He said psychedelic means mind manifesting. Thus, a psychedelic transmission is an indirect message encoded somewhere in the DNA projections of your everyday experience, which might have been secretly nestled into the subconscious workings of your mind. Considering that everything we perceive is a fabrication of mind, this puts an interesting spin on the phrase psychedelic transmission, a mind-manifested transmission. Everything's a psychedelic transmission. From something. Do you ever get that eerie, estranged feeling like everything in your experience is just a projection or a hologram of consciousness, which you are unconsciously perpetuating in your own unfathomed depths? As if you might be the primary arbiter of existence itself, and that if you weren't here, then everything else would just become a blurred memory, a carbon imprint in a layer of mud occurring in some cosmic page that may well have never happened, because now you're on to the next one? That all this is a dream, like none of it would exist without you perceiving it all going by? It doesn't make much intellectual sense, does it? The final practical inclusion I want to add to this discussion is an exercise which Crowley himself proclaimed had helped him to discover his own true inner will. It's an exercise which he called the Samasati meditation. The Samasati meditation consists essentially of training the mind to think backwards so that, in effect, one has acquired the ability to break set, to burst through the barriers of death and its forgetfulness, and to become conscious of the underlying continuum of purpose and motif running through one's being. Crowley wrote about this form of meditation in his Equinox annual publications. He made an article with a brilliant title. It just goes to show his semantic genius and his inimitable way of turning a phrase. The title of this article is simply called Liber Thesarb. Liber was a Latin term which he used to preface many of his writings. It's this word Thesarb, which is of primary interest for our purposes here. Thesarb is supposed to be the reverse spelling of the word Bereshith, which is the first word opening the Hebrew book of Genesis in the Bible. Bereshith means in the beginning, those classic words that most Christians know from Sunday school. In the beginning, God did this and that. Thesarb, therefore, is like the in the beginning of Genesis, except backwards. It depicts a method or technique of thinking backwards in order to seek out the origins of the events in the adept's life. Its purpose is to gain insight into the meaning of those events. The instruction that Crowley wrote for this method opens with this. This meditation is not intended to lead to the supreme attainment. That's more like samadhi or satori, which is a different thing. It's sort of like a vision of one's oneness with everything. On the contrary, the results of this meditation defines the separate being of the adept, exempt from the rest of the universe, in order to discover their relation to the universe. It is of such primary importance to the adept that we cannot overrate it. Let him in no wise adventure to plunge into the abyss until he has accomplished this to his most perfect satisfaction. To this statement, Crowley appended a footnote. One must destroy one's false notions about who and what one is before one can find the truth of the matter. One must therefore understand the false notions before giving them up. Unless this be done perfectly, one will get the true mixed up with the remains of the false. So, Crowley proceeded to state that memory is essential to the individual consciousness. Otherwise, the mind were but a blank sheet on which shadows are cast. The whole of the adept's past is thus subjected to, in this meditation, to the most incisive scrutiny. Every minute vestige of memory trace has to be excited, examined, and exhausted. The stimulation of memory is also achieved by this simple meditation, in a certain stage of which old memories arise unbidden, naturally. The adept may then practice this, encouraging instead of suppressing the flashes of memory. This is what I was talking about before, where you don't make your mind into a blank state during meditation, but you let your memories come out as they naturally are, and then observe them and objectify them. The most important result, as regards the adventure into the abyss, is the freedom from all desire or clinging to anything which it gives. I'm just going to repeat that just for emphasis. The most important result is the freedom from all desire or clinging to anything which desire gives. Continuing the instruction, therefore, and pointing to his own experience, Crowley wrote, "Now that the mystic is on the point of plunging into the abyss, a giant Y confronts him with an uplifted club." Crowley describes the type of analysis of the ego, its experience, its environment, and its significance in these words. There is no minutest atom of his composition there's no minutest atom in a person's composition which can be withdrawn without making him something other than he is. There's no useless moment in his past. If every stitch of experience in the past conspired to create who one presently is, then what is their future? If every stitch of experience in one's past has conspired mystically to create who they are, then what is their future? And cue the outro music. Do 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 do. Yeah, yeah. So that was fun. So thanks for listening, everybody, and thank you so much to my two awesome Pisces friends for listening to my whole shtick. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next one. Don't forget to keep listening within. I'm a musician, you know, and I always like to think that in order to tune my instrument, it really helps to go to a place of silence and tune out the other noises first. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Yeah. And yeah, so anyway, that's the end of the script. Now I guess we'll do the question and answer type thing, and we'll have something of a little bit more of a laxy-daisy sort of discussion.
Sure.
Why and how?
Well, sorry. Let's start off with
Yeah.
maybe we'll increase
break?
the volume on. Yeah, we'll. I kind of want to smoke a joint.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, that was amazing.
Thank
first
you.
of all. That was
Thank you guys
great.
so much for listening, man.
Seriously.
No
This is so much more
Yeah.
fun than me just doing it at home, you know?
Yeah, you have a lot to say, and it's really, really cool. Like,
Mhm.
it's yeah, you have a lot of concepts that are freaking cutting edge, and I love it.
Yeah, I appreciate
It's
that, man.
evolution.